One of the strangest things about America is how many cities look successful right before they stalled out. The jobs were there, the population was growing, new houses were going up, investors were optimistic. On paper, everything looked fine. Then something shifted. Every city in today's video once looked like it was heading somewhere better. Some had steel, some had casinos, some had military money. Some just had cheap land next to somewhere bigger and more successful. And people believed in them. Families moved in, developers built neighborhoods, cities made plans for a future that never fully arrived. 10 cities, 10 stories. Let's get into it. Flint, Michigan. Flint used to be the answer to a question a lot of Americans were asking. What does a good middle-class life look like? At its peak, General Motors had turned this city into one of the most important auto manufacturing centers in the country. The plants were running. Workers were making some of the best blue-collar wages in America. They were buying houses, buying cars, sending their kids to college. That wasn't a myth that actually happened. At its height, Flint had nearly 200,000 people, clean streets, funded schools, a city that genuinely believed it would always be fine. Then GM started pulling out. Factories closed, people left, the tax base collapsed. And in 2014, to save money, the city switched its water source to the Flint River. The river water corroded the old lead pipes. Lead flowed into the tap water. Residents drank it for nearly 2 years before the federal government declared a state of emergency. This wasn't an accident. It was a choice made by a city backed into a financial corner and what that choice cost the people who live there. Today, Flint has fewer than 80,000 people. Whole neighborhoods sit empty. The houses are cheap, but nobody wants to move into a city that once poisoned its own residents. Flint didn't fade slowly. It ended before most people realized it was ending. Gary, Indiana. Gary, Indiana is 30 minutes from Chicago. On a map, that looks like an advantage. The logic made sense. Proximity to a major city means jobs, infrastructure, spillover growth. And Gary had its own foundation too. U.S. Steel built a massive plant here, employing over 30,000 workers at its peak. Gary was seen as one of the most promising industrial cities in the Midwest, a place with a real future. Then steel declined. The plant cut jobs. Tax revenues collapsed. Crime rose. People started leaving. Here's the part that stings. Chicago didn't save Gary. It replaced it. Anyone with money or options moved to Chicago or to better suburbs. The people who stayed in Gary were the ones who had no choice. Today, Gary has fewer than 70,000 residents. Vacant buildings stretch across the downtown. Streets that were once busy are overgrown. Being next to a great city doesn't mean you'll share in its success. Sometimes 30 minutes is all the distance you need to end up in a completely different world. Atlantic City, New Jersey. In 1978, New Jersey legalized casino gambling in Atlantic City, and everyone thought, problem solved. This seaside resort town had been fading since the mid-20th century, and casinos were supposed to be the engine that brought it back. Politicians promised jobs, tax revenue, urban renewal. Over the next decade, one massive casino after another went up. The lights came on, money started flowing in. But the money stayed inside the casinos. It didn't flow into the rest of the city. The casino strip was gleaming. 1 block away was poverty and crime. Then, in the 2000s, neighboring states started opening their own casinos. Atlantic City lost its monopoly. Gamblers had options now. Revenue dropped. Casinos started closing. In one single year, 2014, 4 major casinos shut down, putting thousands of people out of work. Donald Trump opened casinos here. He also went bankrupt here. Atlantic City is still alive. The boardwalk is still there. A few casinos are still running. But the city exists somewhere between survival and slow decline, and nobody seems sure which direction it's heading. Casinos saved Atlantic City's nights. They never saved the city itself. Stockton, California. In the early 2000s, Stockton was one of the most talked about cities in California's Central Valley. The pitch was simple, cheaper than the Bay Area, but close enough to commute. Real economic foundations, a port, agriculture, logistics. This wasn't just speculation. Developers built. Population grew. The whole city had this expanding, optimistic energy. Then 2008 arrived. Stockton was one of the hardest hit cities in the country when the housing market collapsed. Families were underwater on their mortgages overnight. Foreclosures spread block by block. In 2012, Stockton filed for bankruptcy, At the time, the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history. Crime spiked as the police department slashed its budget. The city entered a cycle it struggled to break out of. Stockton has since emerged from bankruptcy. It stabilized financially. It even launched one of the first universal basic income pilots in the country. But the reputation hasn't fully recovered. Mention Stockton to most people, and the first thing they think of is still that city that went bankrupt. Being close to the Bay Area doesn't mean you get to share the Bay Area's fate. Sometimes the closer you are, the harder you fall. Youngstown, Ohio. The 19th of September, 1977. In Youngstown, they call it Black Monday. That was the day Youngstown Sheet and Tube announced it was closing. 5,000 workers lost their jobs in a single day. Before that, Youngstown was the heart of America's steel industry. Population nearly 170,000, factories running around the clock. The city had department stores, theaters, a professional sports team, everything a mid-sized American city was supposed to have. Nobody questioned whether it would last. Steel was the backbone of American industry, and Youngstown was where the backbone was made. After Black Monday came the collapse. One plant after another shut down. The entire Steel Belt story was rewritten over the next decade. Population hemorrhaged, crime surged, buildings were abandoned. Youngstown became the most recognizable symbol of what we now call the Rust Belt. Today, Youngstown has about 60,000 people, barely a third of its peak. The city did something unusual. It officially acknowledged it was shrinking and built a plan around that reality. Tear down the vacant buildings. Turn empty lots into green space. Accept what's happening instead of pretending a comeback is coming. Youngstown never got its revival, but it found a kind of dignity in being honest about what it had become. Pueblo, Colorado. Most people, when they think of Colorado, think of Denver, or Boulder, or maybe Colorado Springs. But go back far enough, and Pueblo was the industrial engine of this state. Steel mills, coal mines, a major railroad hub. At one point, people genuinely believed Pueblo would surpass Denver and become Colorado's most important city. That wasn't wishful thinking, it was the consensus. Then steel declined. The mills scaled back, and while Pueblo was losing ground, Denver was grabbing everything: aviation, tech, tourism, a booming population of young professionals. Denver had the universities. Denver had the mountain access. Denver had the momentum. Pueblo had none of that, and without a second act, it slowly fell off the map. Today, Pueblo has about 120,000 people. Low cost of living, slow pace. Artists and remote workers have started moving in because rent is cheap. That's not nothing. But it's a long way from being the next Denver. Pueblo didn't fail. It just didn't succeed. Sometimes the distance between those two things is bigger than it looks. Birmingham, Alabama. In the early 2000s, Birmingham was being called the next great city of the New South. UAB's medical center had become a nationally recognized research institution. Banking and finance were growing. The city felt undervalued, promising, but undiscovered. Compared to southern cities that had already overheated, Birmingham looked like an opportunity. But Birmingham had a problem it couldn't solve. Population was growing, just not in the city itself. It was growing in the suburbs. Middle-class residents kept leaving the urban core, taking their tax dollars with them. Schools lost funding, crime stayed high, the cycle kept turning. In 2011, Jefferson County, where Birmingham sits, filed for bankruptcy. It was the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history at the time. Birmingham is still Alabama's largest city. Its medical and education sectors are genuine strengths. But the New South Star City label has quietly moved on to Nashville, Charlotte, and Atlanta. Birmingham didn't lack industry. It lacked a reason for people to stay. Those are two very different problems. Bakersfield, California. Bakersfield's population has been growing for decades. That sounds like good news. It's the agricultural and oil center of California's Central Valley, less than 2 hours from Los Angeles. Affordable, spacious, within reach of a major metro. For working-class California families priced out of the coast, it was an obvious choice. Population growth, in theory, should mean economic vitality, more demand for retail, services, housing, infrastructure. But what grew alongside the population were the problems. Bakersfield consistently ranks among the worst cities in the country for air quality. Income inequality is severe. Education funding is chronically low. Crime runs above the California average. The city can't attract high-wage industries. because skilled workers don't want to move there, and part of why they don't want to move there is the air and the schools. It's a loop with no easy exit. Today, Bakersfield has nearly 400,000 people, making it California's 9th largest city. That's a real number, but size and trajectory are different things. Growth can be a trap. More people, more problems, same place, that's not progress. That's running in place with better shoes. Killeen, Texas. Killeen's logic seemed bulletproof, almost literally. Sitting in central Texas, right next to one of the largest army bases in the country, Fort Cavazos, formerly Fort Hood, Killeen had something most cities can only dream of: a guaranteed customer base. Tens of thousands of soldiers and their families, stable federal funding, employment that doesn't move with the business cycle. As long as the military stayed, the thinking went, Killeen would be fine. The problem is that a military base creates a closed economic ecosystem, not an open city economy. Soldiers rotate out every few years. Nobody puts down permanent roots. Retail, food, and services follow military spending, but high-value industries don't follow. Tech companies, financial firms, medical research centers, none of them choose Killeen. Today, Killeen has about 150,000 people. Not small, but its economic structure hasn't meaningfully changed in decades. The base keeps it from collapsing. It also keeps it from growing into something real. There's a difference between being sustained by someone else and being able to sustain yourself. Killeen learned the first one, it never figured out the second. Springfield, Missouri. I want to end with a different kind of story. Springfield, Missouri hasn't collapsed. It hasn't gone bankrupt. There's no water crisis, no casino implosion, no Black Monday. It consistently ranks well on livability lists: affordable housing, low unemployment, Missouri State University, the Bass Pro Shops headquarters. On paper, it's stable. But stable has a shadow side. Young people graduate from the university and leave for Kansas City, for St. Louis, for anywhere with more opportunity. The population skews older. The opioid crisis hit hard here. The low cost of living attracts people without options, not people with choices. The city's economic ceiling is visible, and there's no clear way through it. Springfield has about 170,000 people. No dramatic rise, no dramatic fall. Just steady, quiet persistence. It's not a failed city. It's not a successful one either. It just exists. I'm ending with Springfield because it represents something more common than Flint or Atlantic City. Most American cities aren't dying spectacularly. They're just stuck. Not going up, not going down, not sure if they're moving at all. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to sit with. Not a dramatic ending, but an open question that never quite gets answered. 10 cities. What's striking is how different their failures look. Some collapsed overnight, a plant closing, a bankruptcy filing, a water crisis. Others spent decades slowly hollowing out, losing a little more each year until someone looked up and realized the city they remembered was gone. But they all have one thing in common. At some point, people genuinely believed these places were going somewhere. Every few years, a new city gets the label. The next Austin, the next Nashville, the next whatever. Some of them will earn it. Some of them will end up in a video like this one. Leave a comment. Which city on this list surprised you the most? Or, if you've lived in one of these places, I want to hear what it's actually like. See you in the next one.